Hey, this is Mr. Wingo, and today I'm going to give a short lesson on what is exactly anatomy and physiology, and why should we study anatomy and physiology. We will be studying anatomy and physiology in humans, and human anatomy and physiology are two areas of human biology as a whole field. In anatomy, what we learn is all the parts of our body, where they're located and what their shapes are. This includes muscles, bones, sexual parts, hair, nails, the parts of our eyes, even the shapes of some of our cells. We will learn that anatomy has layers, from large layers that we can see, like our skin and our bones and muscles and eyes and hair, but we also have to look all the way down at the tiny layers that require high-powered microscopes to be able to see where they are and what they look like. We'll also learn that the tiny parts are what make up the bigger parts. We look the way we do because of all those parts that we really can't see with our naked eye. Anatomy has always been studied by humans, all the way back to the cave art that we can see in countries like Australia, what's now the United States, Turkey. There's all the way back to the Greek Empire, too, where they were very fascinated with medicine. There's also evidence that the kingdoms of the Mayans and the Incas took great interest in human anatomy and medicine. The Chinese did as well. There's a lot of ancient Chinese medicine. But it wasn't until the 1500s when we started really taking it seriously as a science and writing down and drawing pictures of what the inside of us looks like. We had detailed descriptions of how we're put together being written down and drawn by this guy in the 1500s, about the middle of the 1500s. His name is Andreas Vesalius, and he's Italian, studied in lots of places, including Paris, but ultimately became a doctor very young, at the age of 23. And he started making anatomy a serious study. The man who paved the way for Vesalius were the drawings of dead corpses that were drawn by Leonardo da Vinci. He would get in there really close and look to see what's in there that's making this tick. So for these reasons, most of the words that we're going to learn this year are in Greek, because the Greeks were into medicines, and Latin, because the people who studied it were Italian. In fact, many parts are named for their shape in Italian or Greek, or their location. Other parts are also named for their physiology. Physiology means what a part does and how that body part does it. For example, the urinary bladder. When you have to pee, you can feel it. The urinary bladder is named that way because a bladder is a storage container, like a watertight balloon, and because urine is what it holds. The gallbladder is the same. It's a bladder that contains bile, also known back in the day as gall. Now, what is unfortunately going to be more confusing is how a part does its job. It's almost always because it's at a microscopic level. That's the level of DNA, the level of proteins and cells and tissues. That's where the work happens. I'll do my best to make that learning as clear and as interesting as possible as we learn it. You'll hear me say, though, over and over again, that the way we learned all this stuff from all these small things and cell parts is from people whose parts weren't working at that small level. They had diseases. We will study many of those diseases to show that the cause really does come down to things at the DNA, protein, cell, or tissue level. These diseases were investigated for dozens of years each, and the disease is almost always due to a problem down that small. So if we want to know physiology, remember, physiology is how it all works, we do have to study the tiny stuff, just because that's the way nature made it. But why should we study it? Why should we study anatomy and physiology? Well, firstly, anatomy and physiology is fascinating. If you just even look at your hand, and see that you can move your fingers without really thinking about it, but you can control them exactly and precisely. It's amazing. So just knowing how all of that happens and how you work, that's fascinating. Second reason, though, is that Americans spend, back in 2018, they spent $11,000 per person on healthcare. That in the United States alone was $3.6 trillion. Now, that money doesn't just go anywhere. It doesn't go into a black hole. You don't go to the doctor's office, they charge you $1,000, and that money's gone. No. That money goes into the pockets of everyone who works with anatomy and physiology. The nurses, the doctors, the therapists, the pathologists, the surgeons, even the people who build prosthetic limbs, contact lenses, people who sell vitamins. Those people are getting paid. That's where that money is going. So we study and we remember our anatomy and physiology, and we get really good at it because that's where a tremendous amount of money can be made in healthcare or in a scientific career. And you get to help people while you're making that money. Other reasons include that we study it for the good of humanity, that we understand how pandemics work, how viruses start to kill us, what ways can we try to get rid of this new virus, there's been so many viruses that have come and attacked us, bacterias, other infections. It's for the good of humanity. Another reason to study is it's for the good of the environment, that there's a lot of waste involved in the medical field. There's a lot of waste that comes out of people. Where do we put all of that? What do we do with it? For personal reasons, we should study it. Why am I the way that I am? Why do I think the way that I am? Why do I have depression? Why am I so anxious? Do I have schizophrenia? Am I manic depressant? These are all medically related and come down to the physiology of why our brain works the way it does. Why do I have disabilities? If you have a particular disability or genetic disorder, we'll learn why that happened. Why do I act and feel the way that I act? Why do I always seem to lay on my stomach? Why do I tend to lay on my side when I go to sleep? Why is it easier for that guy to throw a baseball, but it's so much harder for me to throw it as hard as he does? We're going to learn other personal things like what should I be eating? What's food, and why do we eat that anyway? Why do we need it 3 times a day or more? We study it for the personal reason of medicines and supplements that we should take or that we should recommend to our family members. You've heard of all the diets and things, the Nutrisystem. You've heard of different supplement companies that sell vitamins that work. They're good for us, but which ones? You could spend a fortune on things that work, or you could spend a fortune on things that don't work, or you could just feel miserable. We also study anatomy and physiology so that we avoid unfixable mistakes that we can do to our own body, like catching or causing ourselves cancer, or diabetes, or atherosclerosis, or infection, or strokes, fatty liver, malnourishment, osteoporosis, and more. So we study and we remember and we use anatomy and physiology, not just to get an A in my science class or to make Mr. Wingo happy or so I can graduate high school. We study anatomy and physiology for all of those reasons. But all of that would be a waste if you don't remember it. So please, as you're studying and getting ready this year to enter into a pretty hardcore anatomy class, my hope is that you will study it so that you remember it. The way you could do that is to always relate it to how can I use this now and in the future. I wish you luck.